Te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hi ake ana te atakura, he tuio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei mauri ora. Tēnā koutou katoa nau mai ki te hui o te Kōrau Tōtōpū, the Long-Term Plan, Finance and Performance Committee i tēnei rā. Please let me or the Democracy Advisor know if you intend to leave the meeting. We'll start with apologies. I have apologies from Councillor Brown for lateness. Do I have any other apologies?
Councillor Chung online?
Not yet.
Okay, I'll do apologies for him for lateness.
For lateness as well, great. I will move those. Councillor Panovich will second.
Yes, for me.
Councillors, just a reminder in advance of the meeting, can you let me know if you're attending online? Ka whakapuaki au kua mana te motini. I declare the motion carried. Does anybody have any conflict of interest declarations? There are none. Confirmation of the minutes. I will move that we accept the minutes from our meeting held on 7th of November and the extraordinary meeting held on the 26th of November. And Councillor Panovich will second. Inai ka potiatia te motini. I now put the motion which has been moved and seconded. Ka whakapuaki au kua mana te motini. I declare the motion carried. Items not on the agenda. There are no items not on the agenda. There is no public participation. So just in accordance with Standing Order 19.1, I will reorder the agenda to be considered in the following order. So we'll start with local water done well. We will move on to the report, the SOEs, and finally the board appointments. So we move on to our first and highly significant item of business. Nau mai Margot and Jenny and Dougal to introduce the report. Councillors, just so you know, we are an amended substantive has been circulated. What we are going to do is have the report be introduced. We will have an opportunity for questions. The Mayor will move the amended substantive and there will be an opportunity for questions. Then we will adjourn just to make sure everybody has, had the opportunity to read everything. Also, there may be one or two other outstanding amendments that you want to finalise, and then we will come back to debate and move any other amendments. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Kia ora koutou. So, as everybody is aware, the government has introduced the Local Water Done Well framework to address a number of infrastructure challenges in relation to the delivery of safe, resilient and cost-effective water services delivery. The Water Services Preliminary Arrangements Act, enacted in September this year, sets out a streamlined approach for all councils to establish water services CCOs, as well as setting out the requirement for councils to submit a water services delivery plan to DIA by 3rd of September 2025. Earlier this year, Wellington City Council signed a memo of understanding with 9 other councils in the wider Wellington region This was to explore a regional delivery model. In the past few weeks, a number of councils have confirmed their position and their preferred delivery model with, to date, with Porirua City, Hutt City, Greater Wellington Regional Councils confirming that a regional model is their preferred. Upper Hutt City Council and ourselves are looking to make a decision on their preferred option today. As we discussed yesterday in the Q&A session, the third piece of the Local Water Done Well legislation framework was introduced. It was introduced early yesterday afternoon, and I just mentioned that because of the short amount of time to get to grips with the fairly hefty draft legislation. So I do want to stress that before I share yesterday in the Q&A, we said what we would do is go away and do some initial analysis to look at any implications or impacts on the recommendations that were put forward in today's committee paper. So before I delve into that, I do just want to stress that these views are initial, and we will need a lot more time to really get to grips with understanding what is in Bill 3 and understanding the intent. Again, as I said yesterday, Bill 2, it took us a number of months to get to that position. So where we have landed with our initial assessment is, in particular, stormwater. So our understanding is that what was in the WSPA Act, the legal responsibility with councils, we believe that has been removed. So there is no longer the requirement for councils to retain legal responsibility for stormwater assets, and regardless of what the decision was to transfer them out to a CCO or retain in-house. Otherwise, we have not found anything in Bill 3 that impacts on the recommendations that are put to you in the paper today. But what I would like to do is just take a moment to clarify and give some, hopefully, assurance to you on a couple of other points that were discussed yesterday. So one in particular is around water meters. So water meters, there were two brief mentions. One is simply around implications for people found tampering with water meters. That is not relevant to today's decision. And the other is that the bill does not make explicit requirement for water meters, but it does talk to the possibility of user charges. The other areas around customer focus, there were a few questions raised yesterday around ensuring that the customer remains at the centre of the water delivery changes. So just to clarify, in Bill 3, it does state that the purpose of Bill 3 is to ensure that information about water service provision, including information relating to revenue, charging, expenditure and levels of service, is transparent for consumers and communities. It does also require that a water organisation or its shareholders consult communities or consumers on draft water services strategy. It also, and finally, notes that, just quickly skimming through all this, that the water organisation must use the special consultative procedure specified in the LGA. Okay, so I hope that gives some assurance about engaging with the community and hearing the community's voice. So, as I say, other than the stormwater removing the legal responsibility, we haven't found anything else that impacts on the decisions sought today. So coming on to the decisions that we're seeking from you today is to make a decision on the preferred option to take out to the community for consultation in March next year. So this is consultation on which is the preferred option, and that is what we would then look to progress into developing up the water services delivery plan. So the decision that is made today will allow officers to start working on the information set that is required under the Act to be included in the consultation document, and of course, obviously, the consultation document in its entirety. Okay, thank you.
Do you have further questions at this point, councillors? I know we've had lots of opportunity for questions. Yes, Councillor Randall.
Thank you. One of the things that was noted in the bill was that the consultation options to be put forward were like status quo, preferred option or change option, and one other option. What does that mean for our consultation?
So thank you, councillor. So the Water Services Preliminary Arrangements Act, which is our current legislation that we're working to. So those provisions are what we have developed the consultation approach on. Bill 3, introduced yesterday, is a draft. It is a bill. And as we understand it, the submission timeframe will be mid-February. That will not come into force as legislation until sometime after we have completed consultation. So right now, we need to ensure we are following the legislation, which is the Water Services Preliminary Arrangements Act, not Bill 3.
Okay. But there's no, what's been put in front of us has got 3 options in it. Just to clarify this, the stormwater only in-house option, does that really also mean that you're looking at the regional model for the other 2 waters?
Councillor, I just also want to note there is an amended substantive which has been circulated to you which differs from that.
Apologies.
No. So it is. I think it's the dynamic environment I want to emphasise that has affected, probably the timeliness of both the amended substantive and other councillors' amendments today. So I think we just all have to be a little bit more patient.
Yes. 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 So I see that. Yes. So the last question is just a question about the consultation that the new entity is obliged to follow. So you just outlined that they're actually connecting the requirement to consult back to the Local Government Act and the consultative process. So they will have all of the same obligations to consult with the public that we do when we make a high-level decision. Is that correct?
If Bill 3 remains as it is today and when it is enacted as the Act, yes, it will.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you.
Councillor McNulty. Right. Councillor Free.
Thank you. Yes, I'm just interested in the process of us approving the consultation document and whether there'll be opportunity to sort of maybe even have a workshop on it before it comes to us, because I'm just reflecting on some of the criticism that came back to us on the City to Sea Bridge matter.
So we are working through what our approach to both our communications engagement strategy and consultation document is, councillor. As I mentioned, I think it was yesterday or Monday, not sure which. We've had one workshop with the other regional councils on what that approach might be, and we have another one tomorrow. So we haven't quite got into that space, but I will certainly factor that into the timeframes.
Thank you.
Councillor Randall, Andrea actually has an answer to one of your questions from yesterday.
Yeah, apologies. I've only just received it. So, Councillor Randall, you asked about the value of the assets, Wellington City Council's water assets, and for the 4 councils that are proposed at this point in time, recognising we don't know where Upper Hutt would land. We have pulled the book value of those assets, and our assets equate to 49% of all of those. So, recognising that the asset value alone wouldn't be the one thing that would recognise our shareholding, but just to close out that question.
So thank you very much for digging that out for us, because it's interesting to get a sense of scale, though, about how big Wellington City's water services are in the regional entity. So it's 49%.
49%, and I can send that to
But that's book value, not necessarily replacement value. Or
absolutely correct, and there's different methodologies. Apologies, we only just received it now, so we couldn't put it in.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Okay, and Deputy Mayor Foon.
Yeah, kia ora. Just focusing on the customer focus, I think when we go out to consultation, one of the big questions from the community voice is around their local issues. And while we are at a very big machine end, going, how does the machine work? I think that that's going to be a question that will come from our communities, and I think an example might be Whero Stream, which was interfacing with WCC laterals and then pipes, and then, so I guess in a situation like that, how would we respond, or how will we explain to our community that this entity, how will this entity respond to a situation like that?
One of the pieces, or one of the provisions in Bill 3 that for some reason has stuck in my mind from last night is the in a multi-council entity, the voices from the different communities must be heard and shared across the different communities. So the councils. So the councils need to be cognizant of and listen to the voices from the communities of the other councils that are in that multi-council CCO. How that will happen in reality and in practice, I really don't know. We are quite some way away from thinking that through and understanding how that might work. I would suggest we need to do some work to think about that, and also think about what's in Bill 3 and how that might shape the opportunities for that. But it is something that every council in the multi-council arrangement will need to be thinking of, and I would also hazard a guess they will also need to make a commitment to do as well. I'm just going to pause there for a moment, Deputy Mayor, and just check with Dougal whether he's got anything he'd like to add.
If I may, just to add to that, so one of the things we've talked about quite a lot with a regional entity is scale, to drive efficiency and the efficiency benefits of scale, but an operating model and a design model to drive local relationships and local outcomes. So that's a really important principle for a new organisation. The same issues you raise in relation to a Whero Stream, very important to Upper Hutt, very important to Porirua. So local relationships, local delivery model, local people who understand the network and the people that they're working with and serving is a really important part of the new entity.
So then can I just check that that kind of discussion will be in the consultation document?
We're looking at each other because we haven't got that far in our considerations for the consultation document. We will certainly note that and consider how that might fit in. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Councillor Free.
Oh yes, just a point of clarification. So the 49% share of Wellington City, is that including Upper Hutt or without Upper Hutt?
That includes Upper Hutt. Yeah. But again, that's the book value, so it's a very rough proxy.
Thank you.
All right, that seems to... Oh, sorry, Councillor Abdurrahman.
This question I've been asked just for clarity again. Whatever model we adopt, what it means for a bigger family or for someone who is in fixed income, regardless to the water meter, is there any equity issue that can be addressed through this process, or they have to be worried about?
Councillor, can I just confirm, are you asking specifically about water meters? Okay. So water meters have, now please bear in mind I'm not a water engineer, but water meters have a number of purposes. So they are a very effective tool to identify leaks, but they are also a mechanism of ensuring that the water that is used is what is that's what is paid for. So if you are in a larger family, 4-bedroom house, a swimming pool, those sorts of things, then obviously your charges will be significantly more than a house with one bathroom type of arrangement. So whether water meters will address, whether there will be an opportunity to address equity with water meters, I don't know. I think also the other thing, Councillor, is when water meters might fit in to any possible solution. because it's not necessarily in the time frame that council is here, that the water services remain under council. It could be under a new CCO.
So basically, council will have less influence in creating that equity. Is that what you're saying?
Not necessarily, because that could be in the statement of expectations that we provide to a CCO. Yeah, and the Constitution potentially, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Councillor Pannett.
Thanks. To me, there seem to be some broader implications of all of this in terms of council representation, and I'm thinking about future councils, not this particular one, that, essentially we get particular, through the REM authority, all the rest of it, on the size of our asset base and all the rest of it. So what would happen if this does go ahead? You're still saying it needs the 18 members and then the REM, to just given the way the REM authority looks at what council has control over.
May I? Yeah. To my knowledge, the Remuneration Authority hasn't considered that matter yet, but one could understand that this is an issue that would be facing councils across the country as they move towards a CCO, asset-owning CCO model, and that therefore the Remuneration Authority might need to reconsider how they calculate the formulas for those sorts of things. But I can't say that any work has been done on that at this point in time.
But your understanding still is that the representation figures, arrangements can stay the same, and again, across the country?
Again, I'm not aware of any discussion suggesting that the representation at councils would need to change as a result of transferring assets to another CCO.
Because essentially, if you lose a significant number of your assets, then the REM authority could argue that you don't need so much representation.
I'm going to just check, looking at Beth, but to my knowledge, I don't think the Remuneration Authority determine how much representation sits at the table.
Isn't that done by the council?
Yeah, it's just because I know, but it's just because REM for councillors. Sorry, this really isn't about personal interest. It is about just the future. Is decided on partly on asset base.
That is currently correct. Yes.
I think that brings us to the end of questions. Oh, Councillor Free.
Just going back to the 49%, which is bothering me because it's awfully close to 50. In fact, it seems a bit too close to 50. If Upper Hutt doesn't come in, then that actually puts us over 50%. So I'm wondering what kind of assurance we can seek in relation to that credit rating issue that we discussed previously from Audit New Zealand. Quite frankly, I'm wondering if we should ask for some formal advice on whether because we own, potentially about half or even potentially more than half, that we might be.
So at this point in time, there is nothing to suggest that the book value of the assets is going to drive anything to do with, shareholder arrangement. So that's a really important point. The amount of shareholding that you have in a CCO is not about the asset value. So that's the key factor that you need to be thinking about at this point in time. It is something that would always be taken into consideration, but it is not about, that's not the test. Under accounting standards or any type of control standards under the Local Government Act. So I think it just reflects, probably in the words of Councillor Randall, just the size and scale of the assets that we're talking about in this.
But on the other hand, in terms of debt, the size of the assets is actually material. It's not about the number of shareholders you've got when it comes to debt. It is actually about your assets and how much you owe on them. I'm just feeling that this is a very uncertain situation that we're going into, and I don't like it.
So it is uncertain, and the point around this is that, as Margot raised, this is an evolving situation. We don't have all of the information. We still don't know if Upper Hutt is going to be in or out, and so they're making these decisions on that basis as well. The way in which the debt is calculated, that hasn't been agreed either, whether that's on the basis of total assets, etc. You know, so the methodology on that has not been agreed. We have made recommendations that, you know, in the paper that we still need to resolve these issues, and I think they're addressed by the the amended substantive as well.
Is it possible to ensure that the consultation document highlights some of these uncertainties?
Absolutely, they would have to in the interest of transparency, and but some of those issues may be resolved at that point by the time we go out for consultation, and we will continue to keep you up to date in terms of where those resolutions are through the workshops that we've committed to giving you.
Thank you.
Councillor Randall?
Yes, I just wanted to check back on what we're doing here today. So we're really just confirming the options that are going to be put to the public for them to have feedback on, you know, and those options include the council-controlled regional model, which is the recommended option.
Councillor, that's correct. We do need to confirm, when we go out for consultation, we do need to confirm the preferred option. And so, yes, today is about confirming the preferred option that we are going to take out to consultation. Yeah.
Okay, and also yesterday I asked questions about the future costs, which is obviously in the end the bottom line of why we're doing this, for fixing the pipes but at a cost-effective way. That information, perhaps also along with the information around the scope and size of this council's how much this council would form in terms of a regional element, that will be all in the information that's put to the public.
Yes, it will. We are required to present that. That is in the current legislation. And so that is why the sooner we can have a direction of travel from yourselves as to what the preferred option is, the sooner we can start working on that. Also, to be fair to the other councils as well, should the regional model be one of those options, the sooner we can start collating that collective information so that we have a consistent story to tell in our respective consultations.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Pannett. I keep thinking I'll come to the end and then...
Just one more question, sorry. I've worked regionally quite a lot, which is really positive, lots of benefits, but there is a bit of a tendency to go at the pace of the slowest. Which, when you're trying to introduce quite progressive change, like say on, you know, green infrastructure, can be quite tricky. Are you confident that we'll be able to navigate that with a professional board in place and, you know, through the SOI process, because it has been quite a long-standing problem?
I will give an initial answer and then give Dougal a heads up I'm going to throw to him as well. Just in terms of pace, Councillor, the Porirua City, Hutt City and Greater Wellington councils have already confirmed the regional as their preferred option, so they are somewhat patiently waiting for us in particular to make our decisions so that we can start working those sorts of things through. So you are right that we do need to stay connected and work at the slow, you know, often you work at the slowest pace. So they would like us to make a decision so that we know what we're doing together. But I'm going to just check, Dougal, is there anything you want to handle? Yeah.
Thanks, Margot. The only thing I further I'd add is it is challenging working across multiple councils where councils have their own decision-making rights. What I'd observe is councils in the Wellington region have worked really, really hard to align their decision-making processes and timelines. We're working really hard to align our consultation processes and timelines. There will be further decisions that councils need to make going forward, and you know the intent is there to work at pace. And it will be an ongoing challenge for an independent board to continue to work with councils and your decision-making rights to maintain those alignment. But I think the intent that this region has shown has been, you know, very positive so far.
Councillor Brown, you have a question online?
Thank you. It is just with regards to the use of the word preferred. I would prefer that we didn't use it in respect of any one of the options. But the question I have is, I understand that we are legally obliged to use the word preferred, and could you just confirm that? And also, would it be possible for us to actually prefer two options? I mean, could we actually say we prefer the regional model and we prefer the go-it-alone tube model?
Thank you, Councillor. The Water Services Preliminary Arrangements Act requires us to identify the proposed option, and I note that that's in the singular, so the proposed option, and I'm just checking that is, I believe, consistent with the LGA, and that when we refer to the proposed option, that is referred to as the preferred option. Yes, thank you, Jenny, reminding me. And we can't have more than one, so hence the proposed option.
Pauiwi Kelly.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I was just thinking about the question that Councillor Pennant raised about. Oh no, it wasn't. Was it you? Somebody just raised about working at the slowest pace. But can you just remind me, because I've read so much about this, what's happening in 2028? Because that was what I remembered thinking, oh, that's really good. So we're going to have a solution and everybody needs to meet that. Is it more about our balance sheets, or is it to do with the actual jobs that need to be addressed?
So the critical test that the current legislation targets us with is financial sustainability by 30th of June 2028. So by that date, the Water Services Delivery Plan needs to demonstrate how councils will put in place sufficient investment to meet the network challenges that you have. So that's the core of the Water Services Delivery Plan, and really how we'll be judged in success by DIA, that we are able to demonstrate financial sustainability in our Water Services Delivery Plan. So a clear outline of what investment is required, what that means for revenue and costs to customers, and what that means for borrowing and financing of the new entity.
So is that a requirement? Like, is there a consequence if we don't meet it? Because that's for all councils, isn't it?
Yes, that's correct.
I think that's really, really the end of the questions. But we will, as I say, we'll have an opportunity to ask questions about the amended substantive. So I will now go to Mea Whānau, who's going to move it.
Kia ora koutou. First, I just really want to thank our officers for working at an amazing pace, given how intense this process has been. And with water infrastructure, it's quite a complicated project, but you've really made it quite accessible for us. So I just really want to thank you for that and the ongoing work. And of course, thank councillors as well. You know, I think we've all acknowledged that it's a tough one. But we are working really well on it. Water is a top priority for all of us. I think we can all agree on that. And we need to do, you know, what is best by our residents and our infrastructure, and it seems with the information that we have working as a region is the right way to go. You know, all of our water and our infrastructure is connected with everyone else in Wellington Metro, and in the longer term, a solution like this will be better off for our residents as well. What we have in the substantive is to keep the regional model as our preferred option. We know the status quo is actually not a viable option at all. And I believe, as a member of AOG, I do believe that this is the right option to go. However, I understand that without confirmation at this stage of the equitable transfer, there are some concerns that remain. And I know, like Councillor Brown, he has another view, and that's all good. So I think it's reasonable at this point to include another option for consultation, which is to go it alone. There's still, you know, uncertainty, but I think what we've shown is you know, on the stuff that really matters. We can work really constructively together. We're putting our people first, and we will deliver the best outcome for our city. Thank you.
We will now move to questions of the amended substantive. I have one, and it is regarding the stormwater option, and I guess what's the kind of advice or view about, because, you know, if we don't consult on stormwater separately, my concern is that consulting on stormwater separately adds an extra layer of confusion to the public around the options, and I'm just keen to hear some advice on that.
The current legislation, the Water Services Preliminary Arrangements Act, states that councils must retain legal responsibility for stormwater. And that is quite different to how it positioned the other two waters. And that was the driver, that was the trigger for us thinking about stormwater differently. With Bill 3 being introduced yesterday and it no longer including that provision, it does allow us to think differently, and that is anticipating that Bill 3 will land as it is currently written. So if we were to go out to have a conversation with our community about 3 or 4 options, it raises quite a complicated conversation for our residents. And so I think any efforts we could take to simplify that conversation for them would be incredibly beneficial.
Thank you. Councillor Pannett.
So just from a process point of view, sorry, that's to officers, because we were thinking about an amendment. It's just a simple matter of voting against it rather than bringing something. Just confirming.
I do think we're adjourning, so you can seek that advice in the adjournment about how best to proceed with if that's what you want to do. I think it might be easier to do it in the adjournment rather than in this session.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Free.
Obviously, we do have as a major part of our stormwater provision in Wellington City overland stormwater management. I'm thinking of whole suburbs and parts of Kilburnie, for example, which don't have formal stormwater. How will we, in the consultation process, make it clear to the public what's actually being proposed in relation to stormwater? Will Wellington City Council still retain some responsibility?
Yeah. As you know, and as it says in the paper, the stormwater system extends far beyond the pipes. It includes the road and corridor, it includes parks, it includes private land. As Mr. Ordain said yesterday, for example, your council's obligations under the Resource Management Act will continue to apply in terms of regulatory responsibilities in that space. The bill that was introduced yesterday has a number of provisions in terms of managing some of those interfaces. So there are specific provisions around the road corridor and how stormwater must continue to be managed in the road corridor, as well as provisions for mechanisms to manage the kind of interface that you're talking about. The consultation document will need to do the best we can to make that clear. It is complicated, but to make that clear to the community where those obligations for different parts of the stormwater system would reside under a 3 waters CCO model. And we would give that our best endeavours to make that clear in the consultation.
Because there's also issues with stormwater going into the sewage system. And like there's just a lot to unpack here.
That's correct. There are places where the wastewater system and the stormwater system are currently designed to overflow and interact with each other. So there is a clear interface there. I would suggest that in fact going to a 3 waters CCO model where all the pipes are being handled by one entity would be an easier way to manage that specific interface between the wastewater and the stormwater pipes.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Foon.
Just got a couple of questions on the amendment that's being proposed around water meters. Yesterday we talked about what question we'd be asking in the consultation if we did do it, but I guess the concern is around, without having the business case evidence and the full context, I'm still not sure how a question would land. So, I mean, obviously that's one of the reasons why this amendment is here. But yeah, did you have any more thoughts on how we would put that question if we were going to consult our communities without a business case behind it?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We would need to make it clear in the consultation document that the business case, and maybe not using the words business case, but that we don't have the cost benefit analysis, that work is still to be completed. Which is why it would be more of a conversation. So it could look something like a question is asked, should we join a regional CCO model to deliver all 3 water services? So that might be the question, and underneath that would need to be a number of clarification points. So for example, the principles that would apply, or the key features that would apply for that regional CCO. And so within those sub-bullet points, we would look to make it clear that water meters could be one of the options or one of the features of that delivery model. So we aren't ready to ask a specific question on water meters because that work is still quite some way off, but we do need to make it visible that water meters are part of pretty much any of the options up on the screen. Yeah.
Okay. Just one more question to follow up. Also, that we had said in our LTP, I think, that water meters were to be installed within 3 to 4 years. Do you think that that is realistic, given we are transferring a massive machine into a water services entity? And yeah, I guess how up or down on the priority do you think that will really be? And is that time frame realistic?
I think that would be a conversation worth happening with the partner councils. And I say that because Hutt City are quite some way progressed in their water meter conversation. The other thing, and I think it was yesterday where Dougal referred to the water services delivery plan that we must produce and submit to DIA, that needs to set out the 30-year investment plan, of which water meters, as it currently stands, would be part of that. I think a question that is worth considering is, in amongst the transition, both from a council, an officer and a community point of view, where do water meters fit within that transition exercise? Maybe that timing isn't right, but I can't give you an answer on that at the moment, Deputy Mayor. The other thing I would say is, when you were having LTP discussions earlier this year, and when the LTP was adopted, of course we didn't know as much about water reform as what we do now, and we did not have the information around the timeframes that we now know we need to work to. So I would suggest that gives us the opportunity to have another look at that timeframe and whether that still fits.
Useful, thank you.
Councillor Brown.
I think just a quick, short question for officers. Are they aware of a single corporatised water entity anywhere in the world that actually covers all 3 waters? I'm recognising that in the reports we've received, which have been in respect of Australia and the United Kingdom, and also, of course, the example of Watercare in Auckland, they're all only 2 waters. Is there any example of a 3-water corporatised water entity anywhere that they can reference?
Just one moment, Councillor. Thank you. Yeah. Councillor, we're not aware of anything off the top of our head, but we can see if we can do some quick digging in the background, but we're not aware of anything at this point.
Councillor Rogers?
Yeah, my question was with the proposed changes coming through Bill 3, whether the multi-criteria analysis for a stormwater alone option became more or less favourable in your view?
I think with the change to what we were expecting in terms of legal responsibility and where it had to reside. So now that we're expecting, based on very early analysis of the bill, that legal responsibility could transfer, that resolves one of the concerns around the alignment of accountability, which was one of the criteria in the multi-criteria analysis looking at stormwater. A number of other criteria in the stormwater analysis looked at other issues to do with where stormwater resides in terms of those interfaces with the wider stormwater system. And I would suggest that all of that analysis continues to apply even with the change to where the legal responsibility resides. So I would say there's a change to one part of that analysis, but quite a lot of that analysis would continue to apply in terms of understanding how the system works together, and that integration and how you would manage those interfaces, those issues remain.
And I recognise it's been a really short period of time, but with, I guess, that new information and the sort of way you would assess it now, would the recommendation from officers, if it were to be drafted, would that knowledge be, I guess, striking out the stormwater option as in the substantive, or would you still be recommending the ones from the paper?
The recommendation in the analysis was already very finely balanced, frankly. And I would say that while that change is substantive, that, you know, a lot of the other considerations in the analysis continue and require judgment to determine what weight they should be given. And that was really the approach that we took to the analysis, was that we would put all the criteria that we could think of in front of you so that you can form your own judgment about which of those are the most important and therefore how that would inform your views. And I would stand by that, saying that the recommendation was finely balanced and continues to be finely balanced.
Cool, thank you.
Councillor Pennant.
Sorry, just a process question. So if 2 goes through, which I'll be supporting, does that mean that, 2 things. One is that if they don't agree to the position on the debt, that we have to come back and do another debate? And how would we agree the approach to public consultation irrespective of that? Just would we have a formal vote, or will it just be the Mayor will just sign it off?
If we go out to consultation with the amended substantive, so i.e. a regional 3 waters and as preferred, and a, I forgot, is it up there? So is it just the, so it's just the, oh, right, so yes. And so if we go out to consultation with the regional as the preferred, and we also go out and consult on a Wellington City Council only 3 waters, then that would provide the consultation, that would be deemed sufficient consultation on the option.
Except it's saying on the condition so that the position is accepted. If it's,
yeah.
So what happens if it's not? And irrespective of whether they agree or not, are we going to come back and have another process before we go out for consultation next year? So it's just a bit of an unusual process.
We are going to agree on the consultation document as a separate decision, so that is already going to happen. So, and I just wanted to note as part of that, because I've sort of heard, and I guess we've had a couple of examples this year where there's been post-consultation document concerns. So as chair, I will be working with the team to ensure that we have a good opportunity to discuss the consultation document outside of the official meeting. So I've heard that. So I just wanted to answer that point.
Yeah, so I'm still a bit, I'm just a bit confused because there are still processes that we have to go through legally. So I'm just, can we just have, I trust you, Councillor, it was just, do we have those conversations offline or do we actually have to go through a formal process?
What we are going to do, I have deliberately, we have not had this amended substantive seconded. So we will just go away and consider your question during the adjournment and check in about that wording if there's anything we need to adjust.
Okay, that's fine.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's extremely helpful.
If I just may add one other point, that September 2025, 3rd of September 2025 is a date we really do need to protect. Any delays we have now and early 2025 to getting us to a consultation document and a consultation exercise put September date at risk. So my request would be that we work through and we secure a process that allows us to go out and consult in March so that we can protect that September timeframe.
Okay, that's fair enough. Just my other question, just following on from Councillor Free around the stormwater. So in our district planning processes, we made some quite big changes around stormwater. In the consultation document, will you be able to explain how the different organisations are going to interact, or at least at a very high level, because it is going to be complicated irrespective of what we choose?
To reiterate Jenny's words from earlier, we will do our best to tell a complicated story as simply as possible. Yes. Yeah.
And just to quickly follow up, and I'm sorry, I was not paying close attention to the questions and answers because I'm multitasking, but I just wanted to clarify, it's my understanding, and I asked and this was answered in the prior sessions, that we can change our preferred option in February if we need to, so that would cover off, I think, the questions you were asking about point 2.
So it would just be a little paper in February where we would formally change it, and that's all good.
That would be my understanding, and that's the assurance that I have been given because we are working in such a dynamic environment.
And it would respond to Councillor Free's concern around the consultation document, so that's great. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Councillor Randall.
Yes, I'm just conscious that we're trying to solve every problem for the new water entity right now. So I just wanted to, help us step back a little bit, if you could help us step back a little bit. We've got the September date, but when would a new water entity actually start? And if new information or clearer information turns up around, for example, the stormwater, the way we should do stormwater, will there be time to refine even by public consultation, the exact details of what we're going to hand over before the new water entity starts?
Once we work through consultation early next year, we would then look to turn our attention to developing up a water services delivery plan. And it's in that delivery plan that we would need to articulate things like establishment dates. So, and once we submit that plan to DIA in September, or by September at least, we must give effect to that plan. So at this stage, there isn't a drop-dead date identified, but logically, you would look to establish that new entity, whatever shape it is, as soon as reasonably practicable, bearing in mind the other requirements we have under the Local Water Done Well framework, for example, the financial sustainability by 2028. Yeah.
So given we tend to do these things on 1st of July, beginning of financial year, possibly it would be unlikely to happen before 1st of July 2026.
So, as I say, we haven't made any confirmed decisions and dates, but it is something we are starting to look at under the regional model, what some possible dates might be, but again, nothing has landed, and that is what we would need to explore through the WSDP, potentially also in the consultation document.
Councillor Free.
So I just wondered if we have any information about what other councils are doing with their stormwater option, because obviously some of them have already made decisions before Bill 3 landed.
So the other councils, so Porirua City, Hutt City, Hutt City, have chosen Three Water regional CCO as their preferred option.
Okay, even before the bill landed.
Correct.
If we were to choose a Two Water option, would that make a big difference to our 49%? Like the value of those assets? Well, I'm worried about the 49%, quite honestly.
Look, I don't have those numbers to hand, Councillor.
Okay. And I know Councillor Rogers asked for some advice and it was finely balanced, but I actually didn't get a sense of the comfort of officers of us actually striking out that stormwater only in-house option, which of course has come from an amended substantive. Can you make a comment on that?
We would be comfortable with that amended substantive.
Okay. Is there an equal level of comfort of leaving it open to us to vote on it, separately from what's been written and read? Oh, it doesn't really work, does it? It's one or the other. Yeah. Okay.
During the adjournment, Councillor Free, we are just going to clarify that wording and also the process if you do not wish to support that you follow. Okay? So we'll sort that out. We've got an opportunity during the adjournment.
What would give me some comfort is to know that there's discussion in the document about the pros and cons of Two Waters versus Three Waters. Like the decision that we've obviously moving to here is the Three Waters one. But I do feel that it would be useful to have something in the consultation document that explains that and gives an opportunity for some feedback.
Okay, all right. Well, we will discuss that, and as we say, the consultation document will come back to us. We're going to facilitate opportunity to discuss it before the formal meeting, and we can also change our preferred position if we need to in February. So, while it's important that we make this decision and we're keeping very strictly to that September timeline, Margot, we are operating in a sliver of flexibility here. So, all right, that I believe has brought us to the end of questions. We are going to take an adjournment and morning tea, and during that time we will address those issues. So if you have any potential amendments to lock down the wording, we will just completely double check and confirm the wording of the amended substantive. So I suggest we take 20 minutes initially to give us time to do that. So we'll reconvene at 1:45. Thank you, councillors. to, sorry, if we could have some quiet. We love you, but we don't need you there anymore. Oh, but Margot has a correction to make before she exits the table.
Thank you, yes. So stormwater. So what I've been saying this morning, I just want to correct how I positioned what I was saying. So I did refer to for stormwater, the need for councils to retain legal responsibility was included within the WSPA Act. That is incorrect. It was actually in a DIA policy statement. So I just want to be clear about where that information came from. That being the case, Bill 3 still has removed that statement for requiring legal responsibility. So I hope that's just clarified that.
Thank you for that clarification, and thank you for all of the answers to our questions. It is greatly appreciated. So now, I just wanted to update you. There are no changes to the amended substantive, as previously discussed. However, there is going to be an amendment. So, and we will move to that. But first of all, I want to check in. So my understanding is, Councillor Calvert, you are going to second the substantive. Do you wish to speak now?
I'll withhold my right, thank you.
Okay, great. All right, so then, Councillor Brown, if you're online, we will deal with your amendment now. Are you there, Councillor Brown?
Sorry, yes, I am here. Yes.
Okay, over to you to move and speak to your amendment, which we have brought up on the screen.
Okay, thank you very much. The reason I feel that stormwater should be explicitly consulted on as a separate option is because it is extremely separate in terms of its physical circumstances, if you like, to the other two water systems, and we are moving into almost certainly going to move into some version of user pays. And I think it is appropriate that people who are using potable water and sewerage will pay through metering or whatever other system is arrived at. But I cannot see that there is any logic of having those people, the users, also pay for stormwater, which has a completely different function, basically. Plus, of course, stormwater is the major source of environmental damage around the region. And that is something which is potentially a very large liability. I've had it explained to me at length, the cost of, for instance, remediating the problem in Houghton Bay in the tens of millions of dollars. Now, is it going to be effective or appropriate to transfer that liability into effectively a commercial enterprise, whether it's a city-only enterprise or a regional enterprise? And I think not. I think that liability is one which should be borne by the ratepayers, and they should take responsibility for this. And consequently, I do not feel that stormwater should be included with the other effectively commercial activities. And as I noted before, I raised the question before, when I look at Watercare, when I look at all the Australian water companies, when I look at all British and European other water companies, in no case am I aware of a water enterprise which is, however it's structured in terms of revenue, which actually includes stormwater. So I'd like it to be kept as a separate consultation line so that the public are well informed about the respective merits. Now, they, of course, may provide feedback and other information may emerge, but I think we should start from the position that it is sufficiently separate to warrant its own consultation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. We are now going to have the opportunity to ask any questions of this on this amendment, and Deputy Mayor Foon has one.
Kia ora. The question is, if we don't consult on stormwater remaining in-house, but we want to choose to do it later after Bill 3, 4, 7 and 10, if we don't consult on it, will it mean we can't do that? Make the decision to do that?
We're both looking at Beth.
I do just want to note that we are retaining the option of doing stormwater in-house through a CCO, Wellington City only. So I just want to make that distinction.
I think the reality is we don't have a really clear answer, Deputy Mayor Foon. I think because of the timeframes we're working to, I think in order to adopt a WSDP by the 3rd of September, it might constrain your ability to consult again, but legally, no. I mean, you would always be able to do that. It's just you may not be able to do that in time, so you might have to do it after the WSDP, and we're not really entirely sure what that means in real life, I guess.
Noting that the WSDP needs to be approved by the DAA is binding in the sense that the legislation says council must give effect to it. The legislation does allow for alterations to the WSDP, but the threshold for that appears to be extremely high. So I would not recommend assuming that you can alter your WSDP after it has been approved by the DAA.
Can I just clarify, because under the status quo, stormwater, so does that cover us off, because under the status quo we manage stormwater? Or is it Wellington Water?
The way that we have set out the status quo here, which is defining it as an in-house contract out option, the assets would remain with council under that option. That would include drinking water, wastewater and stormwater, all remaining with council. The ownership of those assets all remaining with council, with decisions to be made about how that service should be delivered. Does that address your question, Chair?
You're sort of saying partially yes.
We're consulting on a WCC CCO option, which will have all assets retained or in that CCO.
So, option A, a Wellington Metro Three Waters CCO option, all of the assets for drinking water, wastewater and stormwater piped assets would be transferred to a regionally owned CCO. Option B, Wellington City Council only Three Waters CCO. All Three Waters assets, drinking water, wastewater and stormwater piped assets, would be transferred to a Wellington City only CCO, which is different to then option C, which is where all three of those assets, drinking water, wastewater and stormwater piped assets, would remain with council direct ownership, where council would then make decisions about how to deliver that service.
Great. So yes, so C is the closest to retaining that kind of optionality that you're after. Yeah, okay. Councillor Calvert.
So, given, I mean, stormwater is piped, and sometimes it ends up in streams, which is a stormwater drain, essentially. So how do you think the public would understand this if, like a stormwater only option when it's probably really covered either in B or C? I wonder whether people will comment on that, say we think stormwater should not be included, or depending on how you're going to present the information.
Given that we don't know yet how we're going to present the information, I guess I would just make the point that is currently the way that these services are delivered by Auckland Council. Auckland Council currently have transferred their assets for drinking water and wastewater to Watercare, an independent CCO that owns those assets, and they have chosen to retain their stormwater piped assets in-house, and they deliver those services through their Healthy Waters internal business unit. So, making the point that while, yes, confusing in terms of trying to explain to people that there are many different options if we're talking about A, B, C and D, that is complicated, yes. And that is currently the way Auckland Council are delivering their service.
Councillor Randall?
Before we had this bill, we were looking to retain responsibility of the stormwater assets. Under that approach, were we still obliged to have our own water services plan for stormwater that would be tabled by September? Or was that something that we just kept and it was really focused on the two waters?
The Water Services Delivery Plan requires us to set out how we will deliver the service for all three waters. And we may, in our Water Services Delivery Plan, say that we are going to deliver each of those waters in a different way. The legislation permits us to do that. So we could, in our Water Services Delivery Plan, say drinking water, wastewater, CCO, stormwater, in-house, we're delivering it in a different way. That has always been the requirement and has always been enabled through the Water Services Delivery Plan process, in that local water done well, one of the principles is trying to offer options to local councils to meet their challenges in whatever way they see is best.
Okay, and if we decided, if we put an option in and it was selected in the end, we would then have to go and put forward a structure, a plan that would be in alignment with what Auckland does, as you've outlined, and it would have 2 units and et cetera, et cetera.
And it would be much more complicated here because of the fact that we are trying to work regionally. And as we've said, Hutt City and Porirua City have already made their decision that their preferred option for consultation is a regional 3 waters CCO that includes transferring that stormwater. So Auckland Council have the privilege, if you like, of making their own decisions, and not, at the moment they're operating on their own. We are not potentially in that situation. We're in the middle of a joint regional process, which also needs to be taken into consideration.
Yeah. And lastly, while stormwater is mostly stormwater within Wellington City is mostly within Wellington City, up in the northern ward, the stormwater catchment is connected directly to Porirua City, and and not necessarily working that well at the moment.
Yes, that's correct, Councillor. So were we to choose to retain stormwater in-house for Wellington City Council and Porirua City were to choose to transfer stormwater to a joint regional CCO, there would be an interface in that Porirua stream catchment that would have to be managed, in that decisions made by Wellington City Council in the Chiltern Park, Tawa upper part of that catchment, obviously, literally flow through to the lower part of the catchment and into the Porirua Harbour, affecting Porirua City and their decisions and challenges with stormwater.
Okay, and just one last question. In terms of our iwi partners, was one of the reasons why they favoured the regional model is because of the stormwater opportunity for stormwater to be done regionally? I mean, even though it was at the time not necessarily in scope as far as responsibility was concerned.
The conversations that we have had with our partners, our Takaheri partners, wasn't so much about the regional model. It was about their preference to addressing our water in a coordinated approach across the region. So there's quite a difference. And so their preference is that we think about the health of our water from start to finish and how it gets affected through that journey. And so it's, as I say, so it's not so much about a model, it's about the health of the water and the waterways.
Pauiwi Kelly. I'm going to talk fast because I'll forget what I want to say. I'm just trying to get clarity about what Tim's amendment is saying, or what his inclusion is saying. So if you can just confirm for me, a stormwater only in-house option that is currently addressed in B and C, so really is surplus and potentially could cause confusion when we go out? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
D is a different option from A and B and C.
But it's included, the in-house stormwater option is included in...
Partially in C, yes.
Okay.
And if I could just add as well, Pauiwi, that the more options we put out to our community, the more confusing our story will be. And if the intent is to go out to our community to talk to them about a number of options, of which one is a regional model, and we are needing to tell a joined up story with our regional partners, we are making a very difficult conversation. We're taking an already complex topic and making it more challenging for our communities. So I would ask that we bear that in mind as well, because that could influence the quality of engagement and feedback we get.
Councillor Rogers. Councillor Pannett.
Just following on from that question, but just to confirm that if we don't have that and we get, depending on the discussions with the region and the public feedback, if we delete that option, then it's going to be really hard to actually go with that option going forward. So in other words, the reason it's in there is to keep our options open.
It will be very challenging if we get to February and then we decide, and you decide that there is another option to go on the table to be included in the consultation document, it will be incredibly challenging to prepare that in a way that meets the legislative requirements to get out into consultation for March. So I think the options we need to explore in consultation should be landed today.
All right, I think that brings us to the end of our questions. Thank you, team. Councillor Free, I believe you're seconding this. Would you like to speak now?
Yes, I will. So for me, it does make sense to put everything that we think we might need on the table. And I do have confidence, and I know I can't speak for all of our staff, but I do know Jenny from her days as a colleague, and one of the things that she was best at was actually, in my view, was actually summarising complicated situations and distilling them down to the essence. So I actually do have confidence that she'll be able to take even 4 options and make it really clear. That's if she's got anything to do with it, and I suspect she will. And I'm sure the others are good as well. Just making it quite clear what the nub of the issues actually are. Now, for me, the stormwater is a curly issue because we have drinking water. Yes, it goes through other TAs regions. It comes from Timarua right the way to Miramar and Strathmore and Island Bay. Similarly with sewage. We know that we work across regions with our sewage treatment, but stormwater is a very, very local solution, and it's one that communities actually have a very vested interest in. Managing it, protecting their properties from it, it's one where we can really expect that our communities want to actually engage with us as the territorial authority to actually help them with solutions that might help manage stormwater. And I can see this only becoming more urgent as we get more climate action. I'm thinking about things like we are going out to look at adaptation with our communities, at slope stability, at how to manage floods. And if we don't actually have the overall say in some of the solutions with these things, I think we'll find that we let our communities down. So I would argue at least that we put the issues on the table. It might be that we all collectively decide that, hey, this is something we can entrust to the big body. But I think it's good for us to tease out some of the issues so that can be reflected in the advice and the way we go forward with whatever we end up with, our letter of expectation or our joint statement of intent. I think these are the stormwater issue is something that actually really is front of mind for people. It keeps people awake at night. Thoughts of flooding, thoughts of slips. In a way, I think that, to be honest, drinking water and sewage much as it probably doesn't. So I would argue for us to keep this as an option. If this does fail, well, it will fail, but I'm very pleased that Councillor Brown has put it up there, and I actually urge you to vote for it and trust our officers to make it all make sense for our community.
Councillor Pannett.
Thank you. And just really briefly, I'd like to thank Councillors Brown and Free for bringing this. If we want our public to have confidence in our decision-making processes, which we all aspire to, I think it's just really important when we go out to consultation, and this is a very, very big issue, that we do put all the options out. And as we've just heard from the officer, if we don't put it in today, then we're not going to be able to consider it later on. It's not a radical option. I mean, Auckland, our biggest city, is already doing it. And irrespective, stormwater is highly, highly complex because the water entity, if it gets set up, will not be the only one managing it. So I think this just is here to make sure that people can look at all of the options. We've got a highly educated population in the city. They don't get confused. And I think that would be helpful. Kia ora.
Councillor Calvert.
Well, I appreciate Councillor Brown's bringing this amendment for. But to quote some of his words of bonkers or nuts, I say this is appropriate. Look, when we look at Auckland may well look after their stormwater, but Auckland is not a little city like Wellington. You know, Wellington City is essentially probably one of the local boards. So we are thinking that we're going to handle our stormwater in a region. Now, if you, the line between us and Porirua is an imaginary line on the map. So you've got Churton Park, you've got Tawa, you've got, and then Porirua, and then you've got things that are connected, streams are connected. Our stormwater is our streams as well. And so we need to think carefully about this because you can't separate them. The pipes don't run along the boundary lines of Wellington City. And so, you know, we either are going to go with, whilst we say a metro model, which is not even the size of Auckland in itself, to separate a small part off. It's like Tawa Community Board saying we'll just look after our own pipes. It doesn't work. So I'm not supporting this. I think it's confusing for the public to add this in this way. We should have three options. We should be bold enough to be able to say 3 is enough. Anything more is not going to help, and it's just going to confuse the whole issue, and it's absolutely bonkers. Thank you.
Councillor Rogers.
Thank you, Councillor Calvert. I was just going to briefly speak to some of the things some of my other colleagues addressed, and thank you for engaging in this topic. There was some discussion earlier by Councillor Brown about being physically separate, and I guess what I would like to reiterate is that there are interfaces between the two networks, between the stormwater and wastewater networks, and I think that was illustrated quite thoroughly both through the interfaces section of the report, but also through officers who attended and answered questions today. I also wanted to touch on kind of the environmental damage, because I think when we use the word stormwater, what we think of is water coming down in a storm. But I think what's really important to think about in this context is that we are thinking of the horizontal infrastructure that serves catching that stormwater. And so we're not talking about transferring the resource management aspects. So we're not talking about transferring the way we build housing, the way we manage runoff, what solutions we might use, whether that's ground or lateral grey infrastructure like pipes. So I do think it makes sense, in my view, to ensure that what I see is a very important interface being between the wastewater network and the stormwater network, where our wastewater flows into our stormwater network and down into the ocean, is managed very coherently by one organisation. I do see that being a massive environmental damage issue. Thank you to Councillor Free. I think I might disagree with you a little bit in the sense that stormwater is kind of a local solution. I definitely see some of those aspects around catchment groups, but then I guess it's sort of to Councillor Calvert's point that those catchment groups do sometimes span across more than one territorial authority. And so it's kind of trying to think about what's the best way that we can actually support those catchment groups to organise around the stream instead of organising around our structures. And then in terms of putting out all of the options, I do think that kind of as elected officials, we have a responsibility to take the very broad amount of information and distill it down into something that is digestible and easy to consume for our community to consult on. There is definitely a spectrum between give them one option to say yes or no and give them, thousands of pages worth of reports that we've digested this week. And I think, in my view, we have got enough information to understand that a stormwater-only in-house option would not be in the best interests.
Councillor Brown, would you like a right of reply?
Yeah, sure. I guess I wholeheartedly disagree with pretty much everything Councillor Rogers has just said, and very strongly endorse what Councillor Free previously said. The issue with stormwater is, as we've seen at Auckland with the floods and then the council having tens of millions of dollars of liability in respect of buying out houses, is that stormwater is a complicated issue which covers a great swathe of the council's areas of activities. And I think it was mentioned earlier that sports fields, there's lots of areas which are sumps for stormwater as it falls out of the heavens. Quite how the new corporate entity, whether it's a metro one or a city one, is going to interact with the city is I think is very problematic, and I think it is better if we keep the obligation in house. And also there is another issue with this, and that is that stormwater clearly does represent a very large, somewhat unspecified, but very, very large liability. As I mentioned before, the Houghton Bay as an example. By transferring a liability into the new corporate entity, we are not doing its credit rating opportunities sort of any favours at all, because a couple of court cases later, that's the end of their shareholders' funds, basically. So, I think that it's something which, because we don't know a lot about the scale of the liability, because we are uncertain about exactly how the council will interface with the stormwater activities, it is something which should be consulted on. And it is, as Councillor Free said, I'm sure that the officers could actually make this consultation explanation clear so the public aren't confused. But it is something which the public deserve to have the right to have a say on. And I think it's very disappointing if, based on the paucity of information that is available to us today, that we've decided to deprive the public of an opportunity to have their say. So I'd be very disappointed if this wasn't supported.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll now go to a vote. Yes, there's been a division asked for. Just to do, did you do the right one again? Okay. That is lost. We will now revert back to the debate on the substantive. Would anybody like to speak? Councillor McNulty.
Done with our conversations around the table?
Sorry.
Cool. It's hard to say that local government hasn't brought this upon itself, whether it's Havelock North. There's a current do not drink notice in Waimate District Council down in Canterbury. And of course we have our own collection of geysers and artificial water features around Wellington City. Te Mata Arawai have 500,000 people in the country without access to clean drinking water. These are shocking statistics and figures in a supposedly first world developed country. The funny thing though is the Wellington Water model has kind of delivered the worst outcomes possible. You've created an entity that's really been starved of sufficient funds and certainty to do proper long-term planning, but also with a non-existent level of accountability. So I think what we're voting on today does bring some objective improvements from where we are today. The greater borrowing capacity is obviously part of it. Funding decisions that are no longer going to be held back by politicians. These entities will charge what is required, and that is fundamental for getting out of a water crisis. And of course, we have the water quality and commerce regulators as well. So I welcome the paper today and the direction that we're travelling in. It does, of course, come with some trade-offs. I don't really think we could have much less ability to influence than we already do in Wellington Water, but we are going to take this further to the arm's length, and that is on the local government politicians across this country and their management of water, that decision's been made basically unanimously down the road. And water rates are going to increase significantly over decades. People are going to pay a lot more for water because they haven't been paying enough. But confident that this is a direction that is an improvement on the status quo. I'm pleased to see a Wellington City Council option only within the consultation, even though I'm pretty wedded to the regional option, and I can't really see the logic for going alone. This decision and this level of importance, I think it's important to have the community brought with us and to have that wider conversation, and we should put forward something of our own and actually hear from it, and perhaps, you know, the community might be so disposed to that option that they're willing to take the trade-offs that come with it. I guess a few quick points. This consultation document really does need a political lens applied over it before it goes out to the public. I know I've written around water reform quite publicly, and the public do not understand the amount of leeway or the lack thereof on the decisions that we have. We are operating in a very legally prescriptive environment, and we need to make it clear that these are the only things that we can do legally to move forward. So I think we really do need to take some charge on that document when it comes through, and really think about how this reform can be interpreted from almost a worst faith perspective and account for that. And just one last thing, I've spoken with Upper Hutt City Councillor this morning. They will join the regional entity. He's absolutely certain. So just in terms of some of the debate that's been brought around the table. So, yep, look forward to an improvement on where we were, and hopefully this is the first step in Wellington actually starting to really address the water crisis that we face.
Councillor Calvert.
Thank you, and I'm very pleased to second this paper. I think the amended substantive makes it very clear about the options going forward, and the key concern that we've got around the debt transfer position. And so, look, I think I just ask for officers that when you're working through your time frame for the consultation is that you allow sufficient time from when oral submissions are heard to the time that you prepare the paper, and that you also, I don't know how many pages you'll be asking us to read, but that you give us enough time to digest the information. And the normal standard of 5 working days is, I think, for something key, we should look at how we can extend that. But I'll ask officers to think about that as they go through the consultation timeline. And look, I think going with the metro option is good, because we are basically going from the mountains to the sea. And so we have got that connectivity, whether it's our streams, whether it's our pipes, or whether it's the source of the water. And I think it does bode well for, we've got to look at how we can not just amalgamate water, but how we amalgamate some of our other services, and how we can get better, deliver better and faster and cheaper by looking how we amalgamate services. And I think whilst this is going to cost, this is putting us on a good footing, and we will also have a lot, because what we've learned about water and water entity structures over the last few years, I'm feeling pretty confident that we will make sure this entity is set up well, it's resourced well, and the right performance measures will be in place to make sure that going forward, we've got something that not only we have trust and confidence in, but more importantly, the public. Thank you.
Pauiwi Hōhaia.
Thank you. I'll be supporting this this paper. I am really encouraged by it. I see the voice of our Tākaihere partners throughout it, so that's really encouraging. The other thing I like about it, it mentions Te Tiriti o Waitangi. It incorporates Te Mana o Te Wai, and so I think it bodes well for our relationship with our Tākaihere partners. The last thing I'd like to say is that, just a reminder that Māori never ceded our rights to the water, so I'll just leave it there. Kia ora tātou.
Deputy Mayor Foon.
Yeah, just nice to sit on that quietly for a bit. Kia ora, mine will be brief. I do want to thank officers actually for really having to take on a lot of information and digest it very quickly in a way that we can all understand. I'm glad that we've got the CCO model for Wellington City only in there, but I do want to say now I definitely prefer the regional option for many reasons, and that is quite simply that water has no boundaries, and it just makes sense that we are working together for the long haul on this alongside our mana whenua partners. I just want to talk to the water meters. Can you just scroll up so I can see that amendment a bit? In my community, this has been a big topic of kōrero, and actually I've got to say I really wanted to have the kōrero about water meters and have a really healthy conversation, but I can't see the benefit when we haven't got all the information, when we haven't got the business case, and we haven't got the context in which it sits within in the way that we're moving toward in whatever water services model we move into. So I think that I will be supporting the move to have this kōrero at a later date, but I do think we need to make it really clear to the public in the consultation document, exactly as it is here, that it is likely that this will be part of the water services delivery. And just lastly, I think what for me is missing here is really that the customer being at the heart. I know that we have to have conversations about how the beast runs, but it is definitely not coming from the customer backward, and that's okay. But what I would ask is that when we are designing the consultation document, that we do have a lens that comes from the person at home who's trying to have a localised, because for them it is local, water conversation, because I think that will be addressed very heavily, and so it'll be really good to show that we are thinking about that, and hopefully that's a regional perspective as well. So yeah, kia ora, thanks everyone for the work to get here today. I can say it does feel uncomfortable not having everything in the boxes we want it to, but we're moving forward. Thank you.
Councillor Pannett.
Thank you from me as well for everyone who's been involved. I know it's been a lot of work. So obviously I'm going to take a slightly different perspective, which is that the big picture is that the government is doing local government reform, and both Labour and National have done that. And I have deep concerns about that. I think, the right order was to look at the function of local government first. I appreciate there's some pressing issues, but nevertheless, that's really important. Local democracy matters, and the argument about past problems is that we were trying to deal with them, and if you take that argument, of course, you should take most of central government's functions off them. Things like child poverty and climate change will be top of my list. Poor iwi Hohaya, I agree with you. You didn't see the water. I guess the question is the structure going to deliver you sovereignty? And I think there's further discussion about that. I think the model is pretty inadequate, but I do take the point about taking the why as an integrated whole. That is absolutely critical. I did ask some questions around representation. If we lose a large part of our function, I'm talking about as a sector and going into the future, that really does have some quite big implications. And as I say to you colleagues, particularly those of you on the left side of the spectrum, it is critical that local government is very, very strong, because when you have a central government that has difficult politics, you need a counterweight along with the courts. I think there are some difficult issues to ask about the difference between Wellington Water and this new entity. I hear all the stuff around the regulation, which I like. I think you do regulate heavily in the environmental area. But really, it's going to be another professional board and with a statement of intent. And I think that there might be a degree of over-optimism about how effective it's going to be. I do also want to raise the point of the lowest common denominator. It is a tricky space to work in regionally. Like sometimes when you want to do really cool stuff, it becomes quite tricky, just given where different communities are at and where they have different priorities. And I think we have to do a lot of innovation in the water space, so that's going to be difficult. I think the accountability is a serious issue and it needs to be aired publicly. I think there's going to be very little accountability. I know we've got all these structures, but really there's not going to be enough, particularly for people who are now being called customers rather than citizens and residents. And I think the whole process around how we make decisions between these different entities is very difficult and very complex, and that just hasn't been worked through. Just to finish off, thank you, Mayor Whānau. I think your amendments are really helpful, and I think it's good that you've hopefully can get a unanimous vote. I don't love that the regional entity is the preferred option, but I'll vote for it just in the interest of coming to a decision. I'm glad that the standalone one is included. Thank you for the point around meters, which are contentious and I think need to be aired through. And my final point, I don't love recommendation 2. I'm a bit of a process person. I like everything to be nailed down, but I will take Councillor Matthews, I trust you. And this is all being on YouTube, so that we will be coming back in February just once we've sorted through a few more issues and so that we can get to a good document for our community.
Councillor Brown?
Thank you. I will be voting in favour of this because I feel like it is quite important for the council to take the first step of this process. But I would like to voice a number of reservations, both about how we've got to this point and also about where we go to from here. I think it's extremely important that the Wellington City councillors recognise their responsibility to our ratepayers and ultimately water users who are going to actually have to pay for all of this. And so the greater aspirational comments are fine, but let's make sure that we actually do deliver a really good outcome for our ratepayers and the residents of our city. I feel like there's a vague whiff, in fact, more than a vague whiff of let's get Welly moving about this independent entity that has been doing the analysis. As you're aware, I hope from what I've sent through to you, I have read the reports that accompany the recommendations, the Gravel Road report, the Castalia report, the Marfick and Martin Jenkins. The quality of that work was very, very poor, and some of the inference is totally unjustified. So what matters from here is that the quality of the material that goes into the consultation is of much higher standard, and I will be very interested to see what the consultation document and material looks like. I hope it is a lot better than the information that has been provided so far, and I hope that it avoids some of the biases and assertions unjustified by facts that we have actually been presented with at this point. So we're starting on a journey. Let's hope that we end up with the right outcome. We don't know what that outcome is going to look like because at the moment there are so many uncertainties. But for us to arrive at the right outcome is we're going to require very high quality information being provided to the public, and for us to listen with an open mind to what the public has to say to us once that information is presented to them. Thank you.
Councillor Randall.
Thank you. Look, this is actually, in a sense, a sad thing for local government. Really, with previous councils more particular, and certainly perhaps not us, but previous councils over a long period of time have failed to maintain our own infrastructure, and it's come back to bite us. It sort of feels like being the parent of a neglected child who has neglected it so much the government's coming in and they're going to take it away. We've got a bit of a choice about where they go. But overall, it's a sign that local government broadly needs to do better. But that said, I think we have got to keep focusing on the interests of the communities we represent. I take Councillor Deputy Mayor Foon's comment around the customer, because we need to be sure that what happens next is better than what's come before. And if we don't do that and we don't succeed, we've failed one last time. Being a councillor from the Northern Ward, I think I'm more than aware of the interconnected nature of our water entities. We share, most of the ward shares its wastewater with Porirua Council, and we're really interconnected. And of course, the stormwater flows from Johnsonville and all those areas down through Glenside with a flooding problem, through Tawa with flooding problems, and then, of course, we're not really taking care of Porirua Harbour in the end, which suffers. That said, I think the key to going forward is having a new entity that's strongly accountable, that we can influence it when it's not doing the right thing or not focusing on delivering quality services. And so I'm sort of very pleased that there's a Wellington only CCO option on the table. I'm still not sure which way is to be jumped, but I think it's important that we get the public's view on what the right balance is. And having the public's view is critical to the success of this, because if we can't take them with us, then it's not going to work. I mean, this is the biggest decision this council will make. It really is. And I have confidence, partly because we have stuffed up a couple of other consultations. We're aware of where it can go wrong, that we have a much better focus, because this is the biggest decision and it deserves the best consultation. And I ask officers to go into this with the information, with the goal of doing the best consultation we've made on a big decision. Hopefully we can win an award on it even. But I think it's very, very important that we have the right information. And so I do thank officers, and I encourage everyone to keep engaged. Thank you.
I've put myself on the speaking list next. Very briefly, I do want to thank councillors. This has actually been a very collaborative process for us, where there is very broad agreement, and there has also been where there is kind of disagreement. I think there's been some flexibility to allow multiple views to proceed at this point. I would like to thank the team, in particular Jenny and Margot, for all of the work that has gone into getting us here, acknowledging. And I guess that's kind of my last point is I do want to complain a little bit about the situation that central government has put us in by not delivering a consistent legislative kind of process in time for us to make these decisions. And the fact that our councils in our regions have been forced to make decisions when, including us, when the legislative program is not complete. And not to say that the progress, that the performance of the reform under the last government was perfect and it wasn't completed. However, this is actually much further from perfect than the prior process. So that is challenging, and I think it does. I actually probably, Councillor Pennant and I have disagreements about the size of local government and centralisation, etc. However, I do believe that in this case, we are being somewhat treated unfairly. And I thank our team for getting us into the best position that we can be under those circumstances, which should have been better. And the next person on the speaking list, Councillor Rogers.
Thank you, Councillor Matthews. You stole some of what I was going to talk about, so instead I'll just use the analogy I was going to use. I don't know, word processing might have been a thing before some people's time when they were at school, but it's kind of like you're working on a group project, you've got everything laid out perfectly, and then one fella wants to put an image in, and then suddenly all of the words disappear everywhere. It looks horrible, and that basically feels like what central government has done to our process. Simeon Brown has woken up from a concussion and realised that he wants to redo water reform, but without a clear direction of what he wants to achieve through doing it. And through doing so, he's set policy directions through DIA and then magically changed them on the spot to be the entire opposite. I think it is incredibly important that central government reflects on the fact that while they give themselves the flexibility to change their minds whenever they want, local government does not have that flexibility. When we go out and consult on something, we follow through on that. When we make announcements, we follow through on that. So I think it's incredibly important that as central government goes and looks at this bill, they continue to follow through. They understand that we are going out to consultation, we have an agreement with our communities, and that we have a desire to stick by that agreement. The last thing we need is them coming along and sticking an image in our beautifully formatted Word document.
Mayor Whānau, right of reply? Okay, but you need to... Okay, neither Letitia or I saw it, but Councillor Free.
Yeah, thank you, and I know I have spoken, so I'll try and keep it really brief. It does irk me when people say that we've been irresponsible in the way that we've managed our water infrastructure. Some of our data would show that after our 2016 earthquake, we had a huge increase in the number of leaks in Wellington. And that's not to say that we maybe shouldn't have been putting more money in, but what I can say is a lot of the problems we see now do stem back to a big earthquake that we had that we didn't get any help from central government to fix. And I commend the ratepayers of Wellington who have actually had to stump up for fixing those pipes, stump up for a sludge treatment plant, stump up for a convention centre, stump up for fixing a lot of earthquake-prone buildings, and somehow still we do have a fairly livable city and increasingly unaffordable rates, but we are managing. Wellington Water has been a failed experiment. I've only seen it get worse and worse. I have to be really honest, it's got worse and worse. So this new solution, we must make sure, number one, that there's really good asset investigation and monitoring, that we have a really good asset management plans, that we actually have customer management. That's so we don't get qualified outcomes from our auditor because somehow customers are getting lost in the cracks between our response service and their response service. I think that's the amendments. I thank the Mayor and her office for bringing the amended substantive. I think it's good. I think we've addressed a lot of the concerns that I've heard around the table through this amendment. I was heartened that the amendment that Councillor Brown and myself put together did actually have quite a lot of support, and I just asked the officers to note that clearly that is something that I think is worth teasing out from what we've got left, teasing out in our consultation documents so we can get back some useful feedback. One of the things that concerns me is traditionally Wellington hasn't been great at working in partnership. And I think it is a failing, actually. We have not been great at working in partnership. We have to... Look, we could at least it's fair to say we could be doing a lot better, and this is our opportunity to do things better. So but we do need to look after the interests of our ratepayers. And think of our Regional Transport Committee, where we represent about over half the assets and population, and we have one vote, in contrast to the Wairarapa, which gets 3 votes. I don't want to see that situation. I want to see a situation in this partnership where we actually, our say around the table reflects our financial investment and the number of people that we represent and who are affected by the decisions that are made. At the same time, we need to be humble. We haven't done things perfectly. We can all learn from each other, but I think it behoves us to think when we're setting this up, how can we be working better in a collaborative environment, in a partnership environment? The other thing that I'd like to stress is I don't think we need to hear from our communities how this is going to impact on their ability to do local solutions. And that almost needs to be something that comes out of the consultation. There are things that people do, like get water tanks, community water tanks, clean up streams, plant things that absorb water. I don't want our communities to feel disempowered because we're moving to a bigger entity with more powers. Thank you.
Mayor Whānau.
Kia ora, thank you. Just to add to His comments, which I appreciated and well said. I think this particular council has really had to pick up a lot. We're an earthquake-prone city. There was a lot of damage done in 2016, and we've had to carry a lot of the weight of the problems of water infrastructure and pay for it. It's really come to roost, so to speak. We get criticised a lot in the public, and I think that's deeply unfair. I know that our current council is committed, and that's why we're here, and that's why we're committed to the regional model. But we also need to remember this is a countrywide issue as well. It's not just us. We're at the start of this journey to create something better for the Wellington region, but also our residents. Probably good to note that I'm glad we can include another consultation option. We are the only council who will be doing that in the Wellington region, and I appreciate, we want to hear from our people. I think that's really important. It's not going to go down well at AOG, I suspect, but look, it shows that we want to put our people first and get their views, and I think that's really great. So I hope everyone can support this and we move forward positively. Thank you.
All right, we will now go to a vote. We're not taking anything separately because nobody asked, but we have got a division. I don't know if we'll need it, Councillor. Councillor Brown, if you're online, could you vote? That has been carried unanimously. All right, we will now move on to the committee report from the Audit and Risk Committee meeting. Alison? No mic. Please welcome Alison Howard to introduce the report.
Kia ora, councillors. On the 20th of November, we took Wellington City Council's greenhouse gas inventory reports for FY23 and FY24 to the committee. The audit is almost complete. There's information in the paper for the Art Committee if you want to know the details of how the council's emissions are going. And the ask in this meeting is that you recommend to the council tomorrow that we sign off the greenhouse gas inventory reports and get our assurance report from Audit New Zealand.
There is an opportunity for questions, but before I move to that, I just want to say, even though we can't record it in the minutes, that Councillor Brown texted me to say he voted yes. So he had the intention to vote yes, he got cut off. So, right, are there any questions? There appear to be none. Thank you, Alison. Councillor Randall, would you like to move this report?
Yes. So the greenhouse gas emissions of the council was an important element of our long-term plan, and it was an element, especially phase 3 or level 3, which was noted as an issue by the external audit report due to information. We've now caught up with that information, and this is why this report has been through audit and risk and now comes to you for recommendation to council. I do want to note that it's a little bit of a cumbersome thing that we are putting this report from audit and risk through this committee to council, which I understand is an issue with the way the delegations work. So it is the way it is, and maybe we can align it given that audit and risk actually reports directly to council. But it is the way it is, and so I ask for your support, and we'll hopefully close out an important element of our long-term plan. Thank you.
Do you have a seconder, councillor?
Councillor McNulty will second.
Was he on? It might be good to have a councillor from Audit and Risk. Oh. In which case, Councillor Pennant, thank you. Any debate? There appears to be none. Let's go to a vote. That is unanimously voted for. So we now move on to item 2.1, statements of expectations to council-controlled organisations. No mai Jamie Crump ki te horo I te kōrero. Welcome, Jamie Crump, to introduce the report.
Kia ora, e ngā rangatira, tēnā koutou. This report outlines the key messages to be presented to each CCO in a statement of expectation, or SOE. The SOE is designed to assist the CCO with business planning and with the preparation of its statement of intent. And just to confirm that this SOE reiterates Council's enduring expectations, including alignment with key Council strategies such as Te Atakura, Tupiki Ora, Hakihea, the Economic Wellbeing Strategy, whilst also outlining specific expectations of each individual CCO. Attached to this report is a sample SOE, which is a representative example of the SOEs that will this report will initiate. So happy to take any pātai. Kia ora.
Yep. He pātai me I tū I mua I te tau patu. Are there any questions? There appear to be none. Thank you. Oh, Councillor Brown, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. JB, why don't we have to debate and approve a statement of corporate intent from Wellington Water Limited, given that isn't it also a CCO?
My understanding of that is that's not for this committee. That's for the infrastructure committee. So these ones are just the CCOs that report into the LTP Finance and Performance Committee.
Did anybody else want to comment on that, Jenny? I saw.
Yeah, through you, Chair, just briefly, the process, I understand it, but I can check, given I'm still learning about it too, is it's going to the Wellington Water Committee on Friday. Officers have seen a draft of it, but it needs to be debated at that committee. Do not understand that it comes back here. It's a decision by that committee.
And we can follow that up for you, Councillor Brown, by email. That would be great, Jenny. Thank you. Councillor Free.
Thank you, Jamie. So I noticed that the Basin Reserve is being asked to do more events, but the slip lane has been closed to pretty much its maximum amount. It's only allowed to be closed for 31 days in a year. So how do you see that being managed?
So I think that a number of things are being considered there. One is looking at the legal status of the of the road. That's one thing that can be looked at. I know that our network and transport team, getting legal advice in terms of what a process might look like in terms of if the number of days were extended. But we also have the Cricket Wellington managing the contract for the Basin Reserve Trust, looking at how if there is any possibility of reducing the number of days that are required for for events. But that can be challenging in terms of, for example, with New Zealand Cricket, they've got a stipulation in terms of what the days need to be either side of a Black Caps or a White Ferns test match or ODI, but that is a ongoing conversation there. So yeah, the options are being looked at in terms of what that might look like, going forward.
Councillor Free, can I just add that it's not just, I guess, big cricket events that we're looking for them to do. We want them to look at all commercial opportunities for events that won't require the slip lane to be closed.
Yes, and I guess that brings me to my next question. With the commitment for it also to be open for people to walk through and to cycle through, how do they intend to manage that conflict?
I think they're doing the best they can in terms of what the stipulations are for the hires. I think as Anna mentioned, for events outside of cricket ones, that absolutely looking at how that can be best managed. There are specific stipulations for international cricket matches that require that slip lane to be closed.
The last question was more about when it gets blocked off and people have to cycle around the outside rather than being able to use the more direct route internally, yeah. But, okay. Thank you.
Are there any more questions? Councillor Calvert.
I'm just curious, because I sit on the stadium board, there doesn't seem to be any reference to the strategies that the boards have and whether they need aligning or not aligning with the expectations, and just wondered whether you've given any thought to that.
So which strategies do you mean?
Well, so I'll use, for example, the Sky Stadium strategy, which has recently formed a strategy going forward, and just wondering how that, the connection with that, with the expectations set by the shareholding councils, is there's no comment in here about whether it aligns or doesn't align or where it needs to change, and whether that's something that the shareholding council should look at as part of setting expectations.
I think, Councillor, to cover what we would expect is that our expectations then get reflected in the strategies of each organisation. So we would expect to see our expectations reflected in the strategies and business plans of those organisations.
Yeah, I'm asking whether as part of setting those that you're actually looking at the current strategy to determine if there's something not aligned with, just really.
Yeah, we would if those strategies have been shared with us. In the case of the stadium, I'm not sure.
I think it has been shared with you. Yeah, thank you.
There appear to be no more questions. Thank you, Jamie. Oh. Is the substantive change? Yes, we have got an amended substantive. Shall we ask questions? You have questions of your own amendments? Yes, Deputy Mayor Foon? No. Okay, all right. Okay. Well, let's move it first and then we can deal with any questions. Is that okay?
I just
Councillor
wanted to
O'Neill?
get clarity to see if Councillor Calvert's comments are now a part of the amended substantive or if they are.
Do you want to take a brief adjournment?
Would that be okay?
Yes, let's take a 5-minute break and you can sort that out. Thank you. to the wording? Yes, so it is an amended substantive, and you have that on the screen. So, Councillor Pannett, you have a question?
Well, maybe the mover can address it, but I just wondered what are we actually going to do for the businesses on the Golden Mile? Is this like a $1,500 thing? Yeah, so I just wondered exactly what. Who's the best person to address that?
I don't know if we're in a position to say exactly what. Anna Calver, I'm looking at you. There's been a question about what we're going to do for businesses on the Golden Mile as in regards to the amended substantive, and just checking if you've got any comments. But I don't think we're at a finished product point, are we?
We can brief you separately on that.
Maybe all the ward councillors, that would be good.
Yep,
Thank you.
Are there any other questions of the amended substantive? There appear to be none. Councillor O'Neill is going to move.
Yeah, very happy to move this paper. The statements of expectation, as we know, are one of the methods that Council uses to make sure our CCO whānau are sharing kind of in the same vision and priorities. But I think this year's statement of expectation is pretty cool, particularly for its emphasis on economic wellbeing and social wellbeing. So we are very deliberately calling for initiatives that grow the economy, also recognising a massive amount of events across Tākina, for example, through Wellington NZ and the halo effect of Zealandia, putting Wellington on the map overseas. As a part of this, as you know, through the long-term plan, there's been a really clear expectation of some robust financial management, and at the same time being mindful of the pressures that Council and our whānau are under. Yeah, I'm really happy to recommend this, and the seconder of the motion will might be able to address some of the point that Councillor Pannett raised.
Deputy Mayor Flynn, you're going to second?
I'll just wait. Just for quiet.
Kia ora, just acknowledging our CCO whānau, and this is part of the process that we go through, direction setting for them for the next year. And actually, no, that's just taken me somewhere else. And just acknowledging all of their work, and thank you, Councillor O'Neill, for doing that. The amendments the amendments we're bringing today really just are about focusing on a few things, particularly for Wellington NZ. I want to acknowledge that they have very high expectations and a very broad remit. But what we are seeking here is an opportunity to really, we moved an amendment a few months ago in another paper where we asked our officers to go away and understand how we could get more focus on the tech and screen sectors. And this was in response to the unsustainability and inconsistency of the government administration sector being our largest employer, and that our tech, science and screen sector were the second highest employer. So there is a logic around boosting or trying to do what we can for the sector to create maybe two sustainable economies, economies for Wellington. So this is an opportunity this amendment seeks to deliver and ask for an action to be done on that. And so that's the first amendment here. So it was a unanimously supported amendment last time, so I do ask for councillors' support on this, and I will let Mayor whānau speak to the Golden Mile amendment as well. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Yep, fully support this paper. I think a huge opportunity supporting our tech and screen sectors moving forward. Can we please stop talking around the table?
Councillor Young, please. Thank you.
And as we know, we've heard from many people the Golden Mile will cause a lot of disruption. We can't avoid that. So as well as council providing some level of support, it makes sense for our economic agency to work in with us to provide that support as well. So I look forward to what they can do around activating our city. Thank you.
Councillor Brown, do you wish to speak?
Thanks. Yeah, I would actually like to hear if Councillor Panowitz, who is of course on the board of Wellington NZ, is attending the meeting, because I'd like to understand his views about this. But from my own perspective, I will not be supporting the amendment because, frankly, I don't think Wellington NZ's role is sort of providing band-aid for initiatives like the Golden Mile project, which we all know is fundamentally flawed and is going to cause a lot of harm to local businesses. And I don't see Wellington NZ as being set up to address those sort of problems. So I will be voting against this amendment unless Councillor Panowitz is in the room and is able to provide a strong explanation and justification of why it should be supported.
All right, I'll add Councillor Panovich to the speaking list. Councillor Calvert.
Yes, I will support these, but I am the second bullet point for number 5. I'm not really that comfortable with, because it's almost us abdicating our responsibility. But having said that, I think it's good that at least we've got Wellington NZ charged with doing some work on this and around this. I will say that I'm surprised that these statement of expectations have come out, and I've had sitting on the Sky Stadium board or the Wellington Regional Stadium, there's been no conversations with me. And I think this points also to how we go about recruiting for board members as well. I think, and Councillor McNulty's raised this in terms of appointments, that I think we really need, we're there for a reason, not just be the representatives, but officers should be working with us as well and getting our feedback. It's entirely what the officers want to do in terms of recommendations, but there should be proactive engagement with us on this, not reactive engagement when I have to request a meeting. So so I just wanted to make that quite clear in terms of this, and I hope going forward, without moving any sort of amendments, that officers will take on board that they really do need to rely or engage with council-appointed representatives on these boards. But other than that, and I just hope we don't lose. I understand the reason to focus on screen and tech. They're both part of our creative industries. So just making sure that we don't lose that sort of point of difference that Wellington has around creativity, because it's just as important, and that helps create jobs too. Thank you.
Councillor Panovich, you've been brought into the debate.
Thank you. So these expectations have been shared with the board of Wellington NZ, so we have had a look at them. We're just noting that we are not the only shareholder in the room, just like the stadium. We are 80%, so we have a significant influence, but we are not the full shareholder. So you'll see reflection within the actual expectations here coming through from GRWC, including around the cruise ship industry, vacant land, and promotion of other various items. This specific one probably highlights more explicitly what Wellington NZ is actually doing within that central Wellington area, and how we're looking to promote and accentuate the businesses within that area within our wider strategy, which includes, of course, our venues, Takina, etc. So it is probably a bit more specific now than what it would have been, but it would have been an underlying activity that we would have done as well. So those are my comments.
There appears to be no further debate. Councillor O'Neill, do you have a right of reply?
Just to say that it makes perfect sense for Wellington NZ to have a crucial role in making sure that that transition period and those businesses along Courtney Place are supported. It's not the only tool we have to support businesses, but I think we should take up those tools when the opportunity arises. So, yeah, I'm really happy to support the amended substantive as well. I think there's a good, strong case for it, and it's certainly responding to a need that we've heard businesses articulate to us before.
All right, we will go to the vote on the entire item.
We vote on the last one separately.
That's why I paused and waited for you to ask for that, councillor.
Sorry, I put my hand up, but you didn't notice it.
Well, we can't see your hand if you don't have your camera on. I'm sorry, it is more difficult if you're online.
All right.
All but 5, is that what you want to do?
Yes, please.
That is carried unanimously. Now 5.
I'm a no on 5.
Yes, I think you've made that clear, councillor.
Thank you.
I'm doing 5 in one go, unless anybody would like any different. Oh, for goodness sakes. 5A.
No.
Yes, councillor. Your vote has been noted. Councillor Calvert? Oh, yeah, I've got it. That is carried. 5B.
No.
Okay. That is carried. We now, just to make sure our minutes make sense, we'll vote on the 5, the opening bit of 5. Councillors, if you could request at the beginning of a vote if there are things you want to take separately, because I'm not going to assume that you want to take things separately. I think lunch is out there, so. That is carried. We are now going to break for lunch. So we don't have very much other business to... We've got 2 items, including going into public excluded, and lunch is here. So I can do... well, let's have lunch, but let's have a short lunch break. Let's reconvene at 12:30. Give us 20 minutes. So I'm much more generous than Councillor Brown. I've given double the time for lunch. we'll start back again and we will move on to the decision register updates and upcoming reports. Andrea Reeves.
I will take the paper as read.
Are there any questions on the paper? There appear to be none. I will move it. And Councillor Rogers, Councillor Pauiwi Kelly will second. And we will go to the vote. That is carried. I am now going to move that we go into public excluded for the reasons to protect the privacy of people. Councillor Free will second. Is there any debate on that? We will go to the vote. Councillor Brown, are you still online? Can you vote? That is carried. We will now take a minute to go into public excluded. We will now close the meeting with a karakia. Unihia, 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 ki te uru tapanui, kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua. I te ara takatū, koia rā e rongo, whakaeria aki ki ronga. Kia wātia, ai rā kua wātia. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy maybe a little bit of outside time.